All right, so welcome everyone to another episode of AlumniLab. Today we are joined with Jay. He is a former LBS alumni. He was in the Master's in Financial Analysis program back in 2022, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about the interview process and also Jay's experience here at LBS. So first off, welcome and thank you so much for talking with us today. So, Jay, I wanted to start off with understanding why you even chose LBS and whether or not you thought it was worthwhile. So, before you came here and while you were doing all these different applications, what made LBS really stand out to you, particularly like with regards to the Master's in Financial Analysis program?
Sure. I think it would help to go back very quickly on my journey before. So I'm originally from India, right? And I knew I wanted to pursue a career in finance and probably move outside of India. And there's only a few options that really stand out for a long-term career for someone who's super aspirational, and that's the UK and US. So my journey did not start immediately with LBS. It was rather with the broader job market internationally. And eventually, as I filter it down to which geography I would like to really work at, where there's more career opportunities, which program would give me the right network and the opportunities and a good platform, LBS really ended up being my number one choice. So that's how I found LBS out. And again, for finance, it's one of the strongest programs out there and definitely the strongest in Europe.
Yeah. And you're working now in London. Did you always know that you wanted to kind of move away from India and instead work in the European market?
Yeah, honestly, yes. I think it differs from person to person. And again, it's an exploration of where, as you go through even your program at LPS, you still sort of discover that about yourself. It's not about having all the right answers before you come here. So even if you come to LBS with an open mind, I think that's completely fine and acceptable. And even for me, there's been times where I've considered moving not only to India, but other geographies for other opportunities around the world, right? So
Mhm.
yes, for me personally, I think I was very keen on working here, given the sort of stage it was in within finance and industry I'm in. But I think me, I also had an open mind at a certain time, and I definitely know lots of my friends there.
Yeah. Were there any other schools in London that you were considering?
Honestly, no. So LBS ended up being like my only top option. I did look at LSE as well. So right after my interviews at LBS, I applied to LSE. I got the admit there, but I ended up like by that time, I knew enough about the community at LBS, and I already felt so integrated into the LBS community within just a few months of talking to other admits, other students online, that it was like the only obvious option.
What made you feel like really a part of the community then? Because you mentioned that as kind of a source of wanting to come here. Was there anything specific that anyone did or that you saw that you were like, yes, I must come?
No, that's a good question. I think it was just how involved people were and how much they cared about getting to know each other, right? And this was all through Zoom, by the way. I was admitted during 2020, and the COVID was still a thing. Everything was still hybrid, but they have this incredible platform set up where you can meet other admins and take part in events already. So it was like I'm getting the education and all the experiences even before I'm part of the community, right? Like today, for example, LBS is hosting an open day for everyone who's been given an offer at LBS. So they already start engaging you and keeping you a part of the community. And even the students and alumni really care about who the future students are going to be. So I just I immediately felt like a part of the community. Even I started meeting all the other admits who I was going to study with for the next year or two, and like seeing the diversity that's come in, and just like everyone's just nice. I don't know if that's by design or not, but everyone's just nice, and I felt that why risk anything else when this feels easy.
Yeah, because LBS always talks about diversity and the different people that they're bringing in. They want not only diversity in terms of where you're geographically from, but also what experiences you had, whether that's in your undergrad or your working experience. I think that's like a really special part of it. But I guess a question with that is, even though it's such like a diverse group, do you think there is kind of this ideal student that fits the mold of what LBS is like an LBS student is meant to be? You say they're meant to be nice. Is there anything else that you think really exemplifies what a student is meant to be when they're here?
I think there's no meant to be, and I don't think there's a mold per se. Uh, because LBS isn't full of sort of, to put it very in very basic terms, full of just finance students trying to get into banking with nothing much else about themselves, right? Like within my cohort, there's people who were previously in the military, who were in corporate finance, people who worked in all sorts of different, like, sort of all sorts of different industries, studied all sorts of different things. I have all sorts of different aspirations as well. That's one thing I'm seeing more and more, which I'm very happy about, that people are open to all sorts of careers and sort of next steps after LBS. So I think it's a pretty diverse batch, sort of diverse cohort in terms of where they were before and where they want to be in life, and that makes it so much better, right? Like if everyone wanted to do the same thing, you end up being in this bubble where your priorities in life also get a little bit skewed. Like you
Mhm.
forget what really matters a lot, and then you end up thinking more about, okay, what's the most prestigious bank to work in, and that becomes your entire personality. uh, so it's important to have that diverse mix of people alongside you who are all still extremely ambitious, right? Just ambitious in a very different manner. So yes, that I think the only mold will that LBS has would be more in terms of what values people have, and sort of how ambitious they are, how much they value teamwork, diversity, leadership, whatnot, but not in the sense where they all want to be the same person.
No, absolutely not. And honestly, I found that in my own application was I was terrified. I'm just another person coming from a consulting background, wanting to work in consulting and trying to figure out what my unique story would be when there's so many different people coming here and so many interesting people coming here. Like, did you find that as well? Were you worried about what story you could tell when you to like stand out to the selection committee?
Absolutely, 100%. And I don't think it's just about a story you can pen down within a couple of days. It's really about what journey you've been on, right? Like a lot of people treat the essay writing or the initial application process as an exercise of how sort of what story they can paint about themselves. But I think the focus more, at least for me, was on, okay, really to reflect more on what have I done over the last few years and why am I doing this? Like really more reflection is step one. So I think that helped me. Like it was definitely daunting, right? LBS, you hear all these things about LBS and meet all these incredible people. It's very easy to feel completely sort of like, have an imposter syndrome and feel like, okay, this is extremely competitive. How do I even belong here? How do I get there? But it's more about first asking yourself, why do I want to go there? Right? Like, and the answer is usually should not be as simple as, okay, I want this XYZ job, because there's lots of places that can help you, like, sort of get that job, and it's really on you to do that. But rather, okay, for me, for example, right, like, I worked in a couple of different industries before. I knew broadly what industry I want to work in, what I'm interested in. I knew how LBS connected to that, and I also knew I really wanted to be in an international environment. So I think that reflection helped me get through that barrier of what story do I put out? Because my question was, what's my story, really?
No, I like that a lot, and ultimately, like the application essay is a very important part of the kind of application process in general. There's no way getting around that. You need to have a consistent story that you're telling, but it's also interesting looking at the different experiences that you might not necessarily have talked about in that essay. So I guess whether were there any experiences or things that you wish you had brought up in your application essay? I know that's a while ago that you went and wrote about that, but were there any stories you wish you could tell in that essay and you were just dying to let the LBS selection committee know about?
Honestly, not that much. I mean, there's a lot I could have talked about, but at the same time, you need to realize what the purpose of the essay is, right? It's to give a little teaser of what your what phase of life you're in both career and personally, and why you want to come to LBS, and how you would contribute to the community, right? So it's just to give a little story and a background, and then and that's the best thing about LBS is that they do have that interview stage where you can dive deeper into all the specifics and really talk about, what makes you unique. So yeah, I think I gave a fairly good overview in the essays about, what stage I am at, and you don't have to worry too much about putting it all in there and writing, combining your 20-25 years of your life into those like 500 words. You can keep it like, focus on the important things and leave the rest to the interview rounds, I'd say.
Hmm. Absolutely. And you talked a little bit about your involvement on campus in terms of what you want to get out of the experience. You were pretty involved here at LBS. If you don't mind sharing, like what positions or what roles you actually played while you were here, but also whether or not you were able to accomplish everything that you thought you were going to when you set out and attending LBS.
Oh, so I'll answer the second one first. Definitely not. There's so much to do here, and it's up to you how much effort you want to put in. You will get 10 times more out of it. Because and it goes beyond clubs is what I'd say. Like, it's not about just signing up for a club and then, organizing events for that club or writing something for that club. It's more really about sort of the community. So for me, right, I knew what sort of my broad interests were professionally and personally. So I like private equity, venture capital. I wanted to stay involved with, like, all the startup events and whatnot, and I did that. But at the same time, I wanted to, for example, explore music more and meet people from sort of diverse backgrounds, go out, explore nature a little bit and whatnot. So I knew what my personal and professional interests were, and it's very achievable to find people at LBS. It might be two people if you're into something very specific, like, the banjo, but there might be 100 people, or the entire cohort in case of if you like private equity. Um, but yeah, no, it was very easy to find options and things to do and things to sort of take initiative on yourself as well. Like I said, it's not just about signing up for things, it's also about what you want to do on your own. Like, if you're into something that's completely new, you feel like that's not talked about enough on campus, you can start something of your own. So for me, wow, there were quite a few things actually. So I first thing would be I got involved with the venture capital and private equity club. I'd always been in the private market, so it naturally made sense to sign up for that and get exposed to, for me personally, get exposed to the London and European environment, make a good network here, and even within LBS. And secondly, just to get to sort of know how the industry works as well. So I was on the VC side of things, heading up socials and events. So yeah, ended up organizing a lot of events throughout the year, worked with the MBA. So again, got to know more of the community in LBS apart from just my own cohort. I think that's one of the best things you can do, just get to know everyone. So the PEVC club was one. I was also the vice president of the board games club. I think it's a great way. It's one of the best clubs we have here. No bias intended. It's super nice to bring people together over, like, a few snacks, drinks, and just like a game of Catan or poker. So I organized like the huge annual poker event as well, and it was nice to, like, every Sunday for everyone who's going through everything different in life to sort of just unwind together. And people used to bring their partners, their kids, their I wish people brought their dogs, but the point was, it was a good community, and it was nice to do something that's a bit more casual. What else did I do? I mean, I was always into, like I said, the private capital, entrepreneurship, startup environment as well. And there's so many ways to get involved with that, right? So we have the entrepreneurship club, we have the Institute of Entrepreneurship and Private Capital, IEPC, and they all really work together, right? So the entire, like, the output ends up being a bunch of events, including pitch nights and then training nights and whatnot, and demo days where you can show up, talk to founders, and just have the best time there. Um, and then within the class itself, I was quite involved. I ended up not going for community rep, it was, but there's many ways to represent your class, your cohort as academic rep, program rep, community rep. Um, Yeah, I think those are some of the top ones, but there were many other things, right? For example, I was one of the initial members of the MMA club, which we set up for people who want to get into martial arts. But yeah, it's really up to you, like I said, to do what you want to with your experience here.
And you were a student ambassador while you were here. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, yeah, so that's the one bit I missed out. But yeah, I was student ambassador as well. And that was a very great, rewarding experience, I would say, like, just to be able to give back after all the help that you receive. Like, LBS is all about sort of like, give and take in a way. Uh, people people want to help you out because that's like I think that's the basis and the fundamental of this community. So yeah, it was nice to sort of, alongside my other students from all these sort of diverse backgrounds, be able to be part of that process and be the initial point of contact for someone who's looking into LBS and just, wondering, okay, what is this place about? Why do I care about LBS versus all these XYZ schools in Europe or the US or elsewhere? And it was sort of rewarding to be able to give people an sort of introduction to this community and tell them about, okay, this is why this could be a good fit for you, and it might not be a good fit for everyone, right? But yeah, no, that was a great process. Did a bunch of events throughout the year. I'm now an alumni interviewer, so I'm still very involved with the community. Yeah.
Yeah, so you went almost from telling people about the community that is offered there and the experiences to assessing whether or not uh, people would be a good fit and a good contribution to the LBS community. Could you tell me a little bit more about like how you actually got involved, being an interviewer, and how LBS reached out to you to start doing that?
Sure. I think the process was fairly straightforward, right? I'm someone who was an LBS ambassador, which already has its own application and sort of selection process. So I was already throughout my time at LBS involved with the recruitment admissions committee. And naturally, like, spoke to a lot of candidates who were interested in LBS and helped them out with their application process. So I was quite sort of integrated already in that sense with the entire process. So yeah, the admission committee reached out to me after I graduated. So it's only alumni who conduct the interviews. So they reached out to me and obviously a lot of other students as well to help out with interviewing the next batch of students.
Yeah, so I mean, before you said there's no like ideal student, they should be diverse, international, knowledgeable, all of those lovely things that really aren't unique to LBS, but are kind of more broadly for the master's admission process when you are in this very collaborative environment. But when you are actually going through and deciding what questions that you should ask a student, what are the things that you're trying to focus on and really like wean like tease out whether or not they're going to be a great fit for the community.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And every interviewer is different, is one thing I would say before anything else. It's just like a job interview or an internship interview, right? People have a framework that they want to follow and people know what to look out for. But the nature of the interview depends both on the interviewer and the person being interviewed, right? Like the conversation, how it flows, and what questions you really end up asking. So I never go into an interview thinking, okay, these are the exact questions I want to answer. I want to ask and just write down the answer, but it's more about, okay, I want to know this person. I have this application, this like 10 pages, 20 pages in front of me. And these are some of the things that stand out. These are some of the things I would like, know more about. And more importantly, these are the things that LBS values, right? So we care about not only what their experiences have been like before coming to LBS or during their application, but also about, okay, in those experiences, that can be academic or professional, how did they showcase how they work with a team or were they in leadership positions, whatnot. And at the same time, but diversity is a big part of that as well. Have they worked in international teams, international people, diverse people? And then I would also want to know, okay, where are they going in life? Like what mentally, where are they right now? Where do they want to be? And how does LBS help them achieve those aspirations and those goals that they've set for themselves? And apart from LBS, how are they themselves working actively towards reaching those goals, right? Because LBS is not the only answer. And what would that person do? Who would that person be without LBS, right? So it's important to know all of that, and that reflects in sort of how much they've sort of tried to understand the market, the job market, recruitment market, and also what industry that they're into. How much they've tried to understand LBS is very important as well, because someone can meet all those criteria, but have absolutely no clue why LBS is different from, let's say, HEC or LSE, right? And that's a red flag, right? Like I said, the one thing that's good about LBS is everyone's super nice here. Everyone wants to really be engaged with the community, be part of the community. And if people don't know that that's what LBS is really about, then that's sort of like, one thing I try to weed out. So yeah, to answer your question, I don't go in with like a set of questions, but rather broadly, what do what do I want to know more about this candidate, and how does that match with what LBS values in every student there is?
Yeah, there's absolutely red flags. I mean, the one that you mentioned as well is, do they actually know what they're trying to achieve in their life, even if it's just broadly. But I know that specifically for the Masters in Management program, a lot of people are coming in with no previous business background, but they want to get into business. How do you how can a person tell a good story about why they want to go into business school when they don't necessarily have that background? Have you experienced that in any of the interviews that you've conducted up to date?
Absolutely, yeah. And one thing I would say is like there's a reason there's a lot of people at LBS without a business background, and it's because LBS is open to those people. And rather, I would say they make amazing consultants or entrepreneurs and everything really, because it's something you pick up over time, and it's the community at LBS that helps you get through it. So yes, no, I've come across not only in my interviews but also just like generally as a mentor to a lot of applicants and students, a lot of people who do not know how they would fit in, and again coming back to like what story they would tell as to why they want to sort of get into management or finance or analytics, whatnot. Um, and my advice on how to think about that and how to sort of structure your story and present yourself in an interview would be really, again, step one, reflect on why is it that you really want to make that pivot or just gain that knowledge of business, and long term, what options do you see for yourself after having done that, right? Like this international platform that LBS gives you access to all these experienced professionals studying alongside you. How would you make the most of it? And broadly speaking, like where would you end up? So let's like let's take an example. Let's say someone studied um arts, for example, or astrophysics or something. Uh, they they would be curious about how next, like like, okay, I don't want to be an engineer, but I do like this industry and I have a good knowledge of this industry, right? Let's say there's a doctor, like there's quite a few in the MIM this time, right? And they know that they like the medicine industry, but they don't want to be doctors for life. They want to do something more entrepreneurial, or they want to consult, or they want to, like use their knowledge in other industries, or help the next sort of breakthrough technology commercialize and really build their commercial skills. For them, it's about finding out, okay, why do you really want to do that? Like, why are you passionate about that? And what skills you need to learn at LBS to get to that stage. So it's about, again, asking yourself those questions and then talking about them, right? Like, hey, like I studied medicine for so many years. This is what I focused on. And then at a certain point, I realized, oh, there's a lot of interesting startups in this space. I would love to work with them. And I would love to see how some of these bigger companies started off and how internally or on a corporate level they are managed. And that's what interested me. And that's why I want to sort of do a business degree or a management degree and understand how that works. So it's again like, being honest with yourself and the answers will come to you. It's not about reading online what people look for or XYZ. It's not about fitting into a mold, because at the end of the day, there's a reason you're applying to LBS. Just think of that reason and be honest about it.
Yeah, can you tell when people are kind of faking and trying to pretend to be the ideal student that they think LBS is looking for? Like, does that inauthenticity come across when you're interviewing them?
See, I wouldn't say I'm a perfect interviewer. So like, there's no one who can always be like, yeah, I'm a perfect judge of character or whatnot. There's always always limitations to that. But authenticity is one of the biggest things I look out for sure. Personally, like that's something like from the start to the end of the interview, that's what guides everything. And it comes off right in the way you just give your answers. I think one of the top advice I give to people is really don't treat this like a super formal job interview where you don't have to be yourself. Think of this as an exercise. You're talking to a friend of yours, a co-student, like, a fellow student at LBS or your university, and you're just talking to them about life. Like this could be an interview right now. Like, it's you actually a bit more formal than I would do usually. But yeah, like, one of the first few things I do when an interview starts off is sort of like, just break the ice, tell the person like, please do not stress about this. This is not life or death. Let's just talk about who you are, why you're here, and talk about me as well. I want this to be a two-way conversation. So if a person is able to sort of work around that, I think that's already like a very good indicator for me. And if I'm asking questions, if they're sort of answering questions that I haven't asked because they feel that's what I want to hear, that happens every now and then, and that sort of makes me feel like, okay, I'm really trying to have a honest conversation here, but I'm not getting that reciprocated. So I think that would be one thing.
Yeah, because even before we pressed record on this, you were talking about how you want to make sure this is somebody you would want to be in a classroom with or talking to at sundowners or whatever it may be. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and even the way that LBS approaches networking is it's normally this very formal process, and for LBS it's okay, let's go have a beer and let's chat about your life, and it doesn't need to be this most formal thing ever. So I think I absolutely agree, that's such an important part of the process overall. Is there anything that like people kind of fumble on a lot though, like whether that's you know not having a clear idea of what they want out of LBS, or it's about talking about their collaboration skills or anything like that? Do you notice any trends on what people tend to be the weakest in when they're talking to you?
I wouldn't say there's consistent trends. There's people like there's people I interview who have the perfect resume, so to speak, like big brand names in the industry that they want to pursue and whatnot. So maybe like they have good experiences on paper at least, but they wouldn't really still know where they want to be in the industry. Like someone says, I want to do banking, and I ask them, but why? And what sort of banking? And it turns out, oh, they don't really know the difference between, let's say, a global markets division or sales and trading, for example. So it's really just digging in more, and I sort of relies first on the sort of knowledge of the industry or just research part. Sometimes it happens that the research that they've done is very high level, and they haven't dug in deep enough or understood the realities of what recruitment might look like when they're in London. A lot of like we have a very international and diverse cohort, and it's one of the few basic efforts I think someone can make is just try to get a sense of the local economy, the local job market, the interview process. If someone's coming in and applying to early career masters, especially like at a place like UK, and they do not know, and they want to do something like, let's say, that's super competitive like high finance or investment banking, and they do not know that interviews and application processes already start in August. By the time they're already here, it's sort of showing me that okay, they haven't really done a, like they haven't really thought about what their next steps are going to look like, and this is one of maybe 20 applications that they're making, and they've not really thought about the next stages in their life beyond just doing a master's. So I think yes, just the research of what they're saying they like and how much effort they've put into sort of just getting to know what the industry and what the expectation should be is one thing. I would say another thing would be one thing I do notice is again this comes back to what people think you want to hear. Often someone would feel like to get a sense of uh, to give off a sense of their integrated with the community is mention a bunch of names that they've spoken to, or just mention that I've spoken to 5 people or 10 people at LBS, and then I ask them, okay, can you tell me their names? And they'll be like, oh, actually, no, I don't remember. So it shows me that never like either didn't speak to them or just did not have a memorable conversation with them. So that's sort of like, another, another sort of red flag where they feel like they're just telling me stuff they feel I want to hear, but rather not like, just either telling me, okay, I just had this one conversation with Seona or someone else, and I really got to know this one thing, and that's good enough, right? So I think program knowledge, genuine program knowledge, authenticity, that matters a lot. But these are just a couple of things. I think it's different for everyone.
Yeah. Do you notice that, like, obviously the student ambassadors are there to talk to students about their experiences and kind of be that first contact point as you were when you were here. Is there a little kind of like alarm that goes off in your head though when they're just mentioning student ambassadors that they've talked to and no one else, almost like they haven't reached out further?
That's a that's a tough question to answer. I wouldn't say completely. Like, I also have to understand, right? Like, I think interviewers also need to have expectations in check. Like, let's say someone's working full time and they're obviously also going through a very stressful phase in life. Applications can be stressful, right? I wouldn't expect them to have spent like all their life getting to know people from all the different programs and all different sorts of backgrounds. So I think it's, and that's by design too, right? We want people to feel very easy to reach out to these ambassadors or people from their own university or their old workplace. So that's completely understandable. I think what matters more is, I think, really like the depth of the conversations that you had with the person, whoever you spoke to. And again, I want to caveat all this by saying it's not 100% important that you always speak to someone, right? So, but it helps quite a lot because you really get to know the community. Um, but it helps that the conversation that you have had with that person is beyond just, hey, how to get in or what's the application process like. And it also really helps if you've spoken to people who are not exactly a spitting image of you, right? So if you're from
Mm-hmm.
India, where I'm from, if you've just spoken to one Indian alumni from your same university who wants to do the exact same thing as you, you've not really explored LBS, because the point of LBS is to not come here and stay in the same bubble of people who either look like you or want to do the same thing as you, but to explore everything that LBS has to offer, including all the different people. So it really helps to see if someone has made that effort to get to know people who are not like them. I
Yeah.
think both of those things really help.
Obviously, keep it vague, but if you could, have you had any of those experiences where it's very clear to tell that they like have not put in the research or do not know anything? Like, were there telltale signs almost, and you knew immediately that they weren't going to be a right fit for the community?
I wouldn't say I think it's tough to, and I think it's unfair based on just one answer to say, okay, they won't be the right fit for the community. I think one instance, obviously, there has been maybe of someone saying that, I'm not really interested in meeting a lot of different people. I I like my home country and I want to go back there and I want to just stay in that sort of environment, which I was quite, sort of, it was just not in line with what LPS looks for. So I think maybe in that instance, it was like, okay, diversity is one of the things that LPS values quite a bit. And if you're not really interested that much, so in exploring different diversities, sort of I think that's maybe one thing. Yeah, but there's no one. I think it comes off like if you, again, interviews are not just 10 minutes and 10 questions. The interview process is quite thorough, and we have all these different things that we sort of try to match and understand people with. So if over 1 hour, or like 30 minutes or 1 hour, it's still like if consistently something comes across, only then. And I think that's how the process should be.
Like, I guess on the reverse side of that, is there any interview that you've been particularly like wowed by? I know that they're meant to be, we talked about this earlier about like 35 to 45 minutes, but I've had conversations with people who they interviewed for 2 hours because they were just having such an amazing conversation with their interviewer. So yeah, has there been like, have you kind of had those experiences of just you want to keep talking to somebody about something and they're very interesting?
Yeah, absolutely. And thankfully, yes. I think that's always super nice to see when there's like, an immediate fit and a good fit and makes our It makes my job easier because yes, they check all the basic boxes of, okay, good, strong, rich experiences, has done the research and whatnot. But bringing all of that together would be okay, because of all of these reasons, the fact that they know what they want to do and they've done a lot of research, and not only in the program but the industry they want to be in, they have good experiences. Because of all of that, they just become an interesting person to talk to. And at the end of the day, all of this said and done, what we are looking for, like you said, is someone we want to sit next to in class, work with in a group project, go out to events and go sundowners and be friends for life, right? Even after LBS, or colleagues or workplace sort of peers. So yeah, no, there's been instances where I've just had, a genuinely good conversation with someone who was sort of interested in a completely different industry than I was, right? So it's not about getting lucky with an interview that, hey, they are from the same industry, so they will understand. It's really not about that. It was a completely different industry, but it's their passion that showed for that, right? For that industry or what they want to do, and the passion and the research of LBS, that this is exactly what I would do at LBS, and this is why I would stay involved. It's one thing to see an ends to, like, ways to a end. I don't know what the phrase is, but means to an end by doing a master's program and getting the job that you want. And like I said, you can do that anywhere else. But why LBS, and why would you stay in touch with LBS? Because LBS doesn't just look for students; it looks for future alumni as well. That's one of the basic questions we're trying to answer. Will they be a good student? Yes. Will they also be a good alumni down the line? Will they be part of the community forever? So yeah, there's luckily been quite a few conversations where I've gotten that sense.
Yeah, no, I remember in my interview as well, I thought I had absolutely messed up because I was having a debate with my interviewer about the role of strategy in investment banking. And I thought she was getting very angry at me at one point because I was challenging things that she was saying. But I think it goes back to, are you going to be an interesting person in class? Are you going to be contributing to the community and kind of challenging the thoughts? I know that even when I came to LBS at the beginning, I thought I knew a lot more than I really did and
Yeah.
got humbled pretty quickly. So I think the opportunity to see whether or not people are going to learn from others is also really, really critical as well.
Yeah, I think you brought up two very, very important things there. Humility is super important. Like I said, you can be in a bubble and think, okay, you're the absolute best at what you do because you have like a particular brand name or you have a particular connection and whatnot. You need to realize that LBS is not a university; it's a business school. You'll be in class with people here with 5, 10, 20, 30 years of experience sitting alongside you and learning alongside you. And everyone's super humble about where, no matter what they've achieved, they're here to, like, have a good time, learn about the industry and make deeper connections. And even for, we're focusing a lot on early careers, but there's people here doing the executive MBA or the Sloan's program with 20, 30 years of experience, top of the industry. And they still realize there's a lot they can learn from us because we would understand modern technology maybe better, or like new ways of consulting or banking or recruitment better or whatnot. So it's a really good community of where people realize there's so much to learn from each other. And that's one thing that, it's a basic, like, alongside authenticity, it really needs to come across that, okay, they do understand there's a lot more for them to learn. Another thing that we look for would be curiosity, to really get to meet people and to learn about things that they might not have considered before, right? It's so someone could be particularly dead set on doing consulting or investment banking, let's say, but those industries still require you, and your success, your long-term success in the industry still depends on you having a good understanding of different industries, a great network, and LBS provides you that. But it's on you to sort of build that network and show that curiosity to learn about people who are interested in careers in media or interested in careers in venture capital. It's really important to it really helps to see that initiative and that desire and that drive to get to meet people from all sorts of walks of life. So not only in terms of diversity of where they're from or what languages speak, but also what their ambitions are in life. And that will make you, again, like, I think that's definitely one of the top things, because like, if you're in the cafeteria here at LBS, like some of the best friends and connections I've made at LBS have been just sitting in the cafeteria, chatting to people, and having 2 hour long conversations out of the blue about what their life journey has been and what their industry is about, and why they got into oil and gas and or medicine and whatnot. So it's important to have that curiosity, and you do not need to be an extrovert for any of this, right? It's a lot of people sort of make that mistake of thinking, oh, I need to be an extrovert to thrive in an environment like this or make the most out of a place like that. Absolutely not. No, that's a very different thing. It's more about when you sit down with someone and you really want to talk to that person, are you an interesting person to talk to? And do you actually care about another person, right? And caring about another person has nothing to do with whether or not you're an introvert or an extrovert.
What do
So
you what role do you think like overall what role do you think overall confidence plays with kind of in the not the search for extroverts, but the search for like students that are going to be a good fit?
confidence. I think confidence is something you can build over time. That's, like, especially at an early career, you're not particularly looking for someone who's like, on the top of the game, is extremely confident and knows exactly, like, how to present themselves. It really helps, all of those things. But at the end of the day, it's also the fact that they will learn a lot at LBS,
Yeah.
right? We're not looking for industry ready professionals on day one. It's about proof that they've worked hard, their discipline, and proof of achievements. So again, same for me, right? Like, I'd never been in an international environment before. I had zero confidence before I came in here, and I didn't know a lot about the industry as well. So I've grown a lot during my time at LBS, and I'm continuing to grow as well. So I think it's those indicators that they are willing to push themselves and put themselves out there, and they've done this in the past. And doesn't have to be in a professional context. In any context, they've shown discipline, dedication, and achievements, and that will always translate. And once they keep working hard, they will have that confidence. So it's sort of like, not a gamble, but a calculated risk you take on anyone you admit.
So when you're making these calculated risks, how do you actually go about recommending that LBS should actually accept one of these students that you've interviewed? What how do you go about that?
Yeah, and exactly, you're right. Like, it doesn't, like, the decision isn't on us. We have a chat, and then based on all the other sort of applications and criteria, LBS makes the final decision. We just make a recommendation. Um, and it's quite simple, right? Like, it's a summary of our conversation. And it's sort of finding out where they fulfill those values that LBS looks for. So again, all the things that we spoke about, not only like, the kind of experiences that they have and sort of what their goals are, but also things like how much they've researched the LBS community, and what, not just research, where they feel they would fit in within the community and how they would add to the community, not only as a student, but an alumni as well. Um, and yeah, sort of like, how much they value all the things we spoke about: diversity, teamwork, are they authentic, are they able to communicate quite well, were there any other red flags. So we sort of like, I would pass on a summary of how I feel about they fit in among all these different things. And then LBS, the admissions and recruitment team, which is an excellent team, by the way, they make the final decision.
How important do you think the interview is to actually getting accepted ultimately? Like, are you in the LBS doesn't allow us to know what the admission rates are, of course, and I won't ask you that because I'm sure you would get in a lot of trouble if you even knew it. But once you get to the interview process, do you have a pretty good chance of getting in? Has it kind of been narrowed down a lot at that point, or
Oh, no, I wouldn't say that for sure. The interview is very important. There's a reason LBS does an interview, and a lot of people, a lot of other places do not, right? So the fact that you've made it to the interview is really a strong indication that you hit all the right boxes, and
Mhm.
that you could be a good fit here, right? On paper, but that's on paper, based on like a quick conversation with someone, and it's essentially just a coffee chat, right? Like, you will have ideally hundreds of these coffee chats and these initial conversations with people when you're at LBS. So the interview is really just the first one of those many that you will have throughout the year. So just based on that first one, yes, you're a great person on paper, and I can go to your LinkedIn and see all these different things. But when I sit down with you, do I get a sense of all of that? So getting to the interview process means that on paper you fit all of that, but your chances of getting in after that or not getting in after that really depends on the actual conversation. So yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, I guess you've done a couple of these interviews at this point, so whether or not you've recommended other people, that's entirely based on as well, like what person they matched you with in order to interview. It doesn't necessarily mean that just because you've recommended 2 out of 6 or 2 out of 9, that's what the acceptance rate after the interview is. It's really dependent on who you're getting as well. How does
Absolutely.
the matching process work as well?
Oh, I'm not privy to that. But yeah, no, I couldn't comment on that because I think similarity of experiences helps a bit, but I've also interviewed people with quite different backgrounds than
Mhm.
myself. One thing that does matter, I think, help is the same program. So I did the MFA. So mostly I interview the MFA applicants because you sort of understand what the specific of the program and the demands of the program would be like. Because let's say the masters in analytics or the executive MBA or the Sloan, they really differ from each other, right? So yeah, I think that's the one criteria, but others I cannot comment on.
Fair enough. I guess just to close off is, are there any are there any things that we didn't cover today that you wish somebody coming into an interview with, say, you or one of your friends from your time here at LBS? Is there anything you want to tell them? Any tips that you want to give about the interview process or even just the application process in general?
I think we've covered most of it, but one last maybe I think parting bit I would say is really just zoom out when you apply, zoom out before you give an interview, and really reflect and think about what you've done before, why are you doing this, and long term, what's your plan, right? Because LBS is one part of that. So really just like, spend a lot of time reflecting and then just have a like on the interview bit and even on the essay bit and then in the entire process, just really be yourself and be as authentic as you can. Do not go in because you can read all these things online from all sorts of sources about what people think you should say or people think you should be, including this interview. But right, one thing I can definitely say is do not try to fit into any of those molds. Rather, just think about what values LBS would look for and think about how you match those values and just be super honest in your essays, in your interviews, and all the conversations you have with everyone here. But yeah, that's my part, last bit.
No, I think everything that you've talked about, whether or not that's the fact that LBS doesn't necessarily have an ideal student, but making sure you're portraying your career aspirations, or that you're a global and diverse individual, or even, as you just said, like zooming out from your application and figuring out what story you want to tell authentically to the interviewer. I think all of this has been really, really helpful, and I hope that anyone who now has an interview with you will know that they should not be treating it like a Q&A session, and to be prepared for a nice little coffee chat like you would be having at the rest of your time, both at LBS and as an alumni. So thank you so much for chatting with me. And I know everyone else is going to be really happy with all the insights that they've gotten today. So thank you again.
No worries. Cheers.